So let's go to our next speaker, Angela Locklear, who's an herbalist and author of a beginner's guide to Native American herbal medicine from Charlotte, North Carolina. The title of her talk is Plants as Kin, Rooted Practices for Healing and Belonging. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. As she said, my name is Angela Locklear. I'm the author of a beginner's guide to Native American herbal medicine. I'm also an herbalist and forager from the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. My people come from wetlands once dismissed as undesirable, now recognized for their extraordinary biodiversity. My connection to plants and land was fostered by my grandmother, who was raised on a Carolina Pocosin, in between Big Raft Swamp and Big Marsh Swamp, on a piece of land that my people called the desert. A Pocosin is the Algonquin word for meaning swamp on a hill. My intention today is to teach plant relationships over remedies. I invite us to meet 3 plant relatives as kin who heal, anchor belonging, and foster cultural resilience. So what I've heard throughout these few days at the conference is that the work that we're doing is very challenging. And I actually read this on Instagram this morning. It said, the healers suffer first, then return with the medicine. And this has definitely been part of my story. So what I'm going to go through today is some practices that I've cultivated in order to create resilience in my life. I've been practicing herbalism for about 20 years, and I've been in different wellness and herbal spaces. And what I've found is that a lot of the experience is very triggering, and I've had to come in and out of those spaces to continue my learning and heal in between some of that time period, and also learn language to help me explain what was happening within my body and what was happening within my spirit. It's been a long road, and I'm grateful for the youth and how they're bringing in language to help us be able to describe this and learn and grow so that we can have more representation within these spaces. Because I do believe that we're lacking representation because so many go into these spaces and they experience a trauma activation that they can't explain and they don't know how to heal from it. So then they leave the spaces completely. All right, catch up with my slides. So there's the swamp right there. Place is my first teacher, and I just love our land there. All right, so why somatics and plants? Because we know that the body keeps the score. Stress and trauma live in the body. And colonization and loss of culture has created marks of trauma that cause hypervigilance, bracing, and generational stress. Hypervigilance shows up when the body is constantly scanning for threat, even when you're safe. The body feels shallow breaths, jumpy startles, tight jaw, and eyes. For me in these spaces, that might be when I'm scanning the area of maybe a yoga studio and I'm seeing white sage bundles that I know is probably appropriated or poached. I'm seeing other symbolism from other cultures that are again appropriated. And I think about how triggering is that of the people of that culture when they're coming into a healing space. Bracing, that's that low-grade, full-body hold. We're always stiff. We have lifted shoulders, clenched jaw, and a stiff belly. This makes rest and digestion harder. And it's super simple to say it's, my digestion. But when we're not digesting well, we're not taking in our nutrients and cultivating energy from our foods or our plants. Generational stress. This refers to patterns the body learns from family and community histories, not just your own. The go fast, be ready mindset gets inherited and practiced. And we know that that's a mindset that comes from a colonized world, that it's not a native world view. But we're in that every day, so many of us, and anybody can practice these things because we're in a world that doesn't support our worldview. So when we're in this state, the threat system is on, the rest and digest system is dimmed. However, the practical steps of the practical step of having a cup of tea, that sensory input of warmth, aroma, and taste, combined with slow exhales, create a practical signal of safety. Plants here serve as cues, not cures. They help the body recognize safety again so relationship and repair are possible. So here's our 3 plant relatives at a glance. Bee balm, passion flower, and blue vervain. I chose these plants because they're very accessible. Many of them can be cultivated in your garden or are found on, throughout the North American continent. Bee balm for the grief and gatherings. It teaches us to exhale warmly, sip with company, and meets us at sunny woodland edges. Passion flower is for the overthinkers and tender hearts. It teaches us to soften the jaw, lengthen the breath, and meets us along sunny fences and thickets. Blue vervain is for the perfectionist, which I know we have a lot of those in here. I'm one myself. And those who get stuck in grief. It teaches us to drop our shoulders, meeting us in wet meadows and pond edges. These 3 plants remind us that healing comes through kinship with body, breath, and the land itself. We'll begin with bee balm, a relative that not only comforts the spirit, but also nourishes the digestion. So I wanted to bring in how we can work with these plants nutritionally as well as medicinally. Bee balm actually pairs well with legumes and brassicas due to the aromatic phenols of thymol and cravicol. Both work gently to inhibit harmful microbes and easing digestive spasms to support overall gut health. In herbalism, we call bee balm a warming diffusive. What diffusive means is that the herb's action spreads outwards and opens up the surface, warms the periphery, and gets things moving. This can help ease bloating, soften chest tightness, and even help re-enter conversation. So when we're having a hard time with these emotions, sipping a cup of bee balm, sitting with company, and expressing them, bee balm is going to be supportive in that way. It's contraindicated in those with mint allergies or experience aggravation with spicy aromatics. So as we gently nudge the system into rest, digest, and recovery, we soften the body with passion flower. In passion flower, we're looking at the key flavonoids, viexin and chrysin. Viexin offers gentle calming and anti-inflammatory benefits, and it likely supports GABA production. GABA is your brain's main calm down chemical, the nervous system's brake pedal. It tells neurons to slow their firing, which helps ease worry, relax muscles, and support sleep. Many calming practices like the slow exhale, warm tea rituals, and some herbs support GABA's tone indirectly. Passion flower also helps by downshifting a busy mind, supporting sleep hygiene, and morning energy. I want to come back around to the culinary uses of these plants. I did a foraging class on Sunday morning, and it was amazing Derek taught us a lot, and he actually had bee balm there, and people noted how it tasted like oregano or thyme, and that's because they share the aromatic compounds. And when we get to know these plants and we know these little things, nuances about them, we can integrate them into our cooking better. So say we wanted to use thyme and we actually had some bee balm, we can mix those together and add the bee balm in with recipes that maybe we would do with thyme, like chicken. I actually have a loose leaf tea company. That's how I started to get my work out into the world. And people would ask me, well, how do you come up with these formulations? Because I have a variety of different formulations for cold, flu, and immune, stress and anxiety. And I would say, well, one, I was a gardener. I'm still a gardener. I said, I feel like the plants speak to me. They tell me where do they want to go. And having the base knowledge of herbalism, of what herb supports what system, was the foundation. However, when I'm working with these plants, I'm visually seeing them and seeing what colors are playing off of each other and how they would move together. So, but another part of it is you start to pick up the flavors. You have one plant at a time, and you taste them. And it's not much different than what chefs do. They taste each ingredient, and you start to figure out, well, what flavors will work together? And the way that I put out my teas is a way that's like creative and exciting, and it's really just to open people's curiosity into my world of herbalism. So it's a little bit different, but people get intrigued by the way that I do it. All right. So on the sides have a little bit more extra information. I did have a QR code, and I'm happy to share that if anybody wants to keep these slides so that they can go in more in depth in their knowledge. All right, so our third plant relative is blue vervain. Blue vervain contains the bitter iridoids of verbenilin and hostitoside. This primes the digestive secretions and vagal tone before meals and is especially helpful with rich and heavy foods, easing stress-driven snacking. The somatic cue for blue vervain is very strong. It's people who are tense up like this. They usually need blue vervain. It'll help to bring those shoulders down, open up the digestive system. Another thing that I noted as we were tasting different foods, native foods, is that the traditional or ancestral foods have all of the flavor notes. And one of the flavors that we're missing in our current world is bitter, because it's often covered up with sugar, even when we have our cup of coffee, because coffee is medicinal. That's a herb. It's medicinal. But most people load it with sugar. You go to these coffee shops, it's just a sugar beverage. It's a milkshake, essentially. And we're not getting those bitter notes. And it's those bitter notes that start that north to south process of digestion, starting in the mouth, triggering saliva, cueing the vagus nerve, turning on stomach acid, waking up pancreatic enzymes, the gallbladder bile, and small intestine motility. So food breaks down better and bloating eases. And when it comes to the work that we're doing, like I said, to be able to absorb our nutrients, to have good digestion, and to have energy and not feel heavy and bloated all the time gives us that endurance to do this hard work that we're doing. Because like Danae said, this is hard. Coming out here and being a minority within these spaces is really difficult. And the most important thing we could do is support our nervous system, support our digestion, move our bodies, and be engaged in the land work. All right, so mindful gathering. This was a section that was probably the hardest for me to do because it made me it highlighted the lack of eldership that has been in my life. Derek, gave us some great insight at the foraging class about how he forages. I actually don't forage very much anymore because I saw it as an extractive activity that was happening in my area, and I just didn't want to perpetuate that. If I do forage, it's just a little bit for myself. More so, I just connect with our land. I connect with our seasons to recognize what's growing during that time. I love having those time marks. I'm sentimental, and my father died around the time that elderflower was blooming, and he was in hospice for a matter of weeks, and I had to drive down the interstate an hour or so to see him in hospice. And during that time period, elderflower was blooming, and then the berries started to come. And every year, those elderflowers mark that time for me, and it's bittersweet. So now I use that signal from land and these plants to mark these times in my life. And what I do is I usually make an elderberry syrup, a little elixir in memory of him, and I consume that throughout the month. So mindful gathering was challenging because I recognized that we lack so many elders. And at this point in my life, I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm like, I'm almost the elder, and I still haven't really found that, that true elder and mentor to walk me through this process. But now I'm being called to be an elder myself and to teach the youth. And it's scary, but, I said before I came here, I'm like, Creator's laid this path for me, and I'm just going to have to walk it because I don't have any choice. Even if it's just out of curiosity of where it's going to take me, I'm just going to keep walking. I think that what I've recognized too here is that there's so much passion in what everyone is doing that you can't give it up, and it's a lifelong journey. The next thing now is to learn language, because what I'm finding is that my language to explain how I've connected with plants and how I've connected with spirit is completely lacking, and it's because I'm using the English language. So the only way I'm going to be able to express what's really inside of me is to learn my own language. So that's my next step at 45 years old, because it's never too late. This is a lifelong journey, and we're doing it for our next generations. So I'll briefly go into mindful preparation. As I've mentioned here, that breathing techniques are important. You want to regulate first before you prepare your tea. It can be as simple as just 4 long exhales, making sure your feet are grounded, that you're unclenching your jaw and shoulders. Then we brew and we prepare this plant with intention. We take on that sensory notes of the warmth, the aroma, and the taste. We're in that moment. And whenever we're experiencing those sensory elements, we're calming that trauma within our body. A lot of therapists will say, I'm going in therapy now, and it's like, if I get overly triggered, it's like, okay, stop. Look at something, describe it. Taste something, describe it. Bring in that sensory awareness. So we want to do that before we brew our cup of tea. The basic principles with leaves and flowers is 1 teaspoon of dried and 1 tablespoon of fresh per 8 ounces of water, and just steeping 10 to 15 minutes. I also recommend that you do 1 plant at a time so you can taste those notes, and you steep it a variety of time periods so that you can get those different notes. Because chamomile is great at a couple minutes, and it's going to be mild and apple flavored, but chamomile is actually a really powerful bitter if it sits. So that's going to support the digestive system even more, because it's going to have that same bitter qualities of blue vervain. So just do different timings and tastings to experience that plant in different ways. Roots, barks, and seeds they have more tenacity You're going to have to simmer them a little bit. So again, 1 teaspoon per 8 ounces, simmering 10 to 20 minutes with the lid on to keep those aromatics inside of the pot. Frequency, sipping 1 to 3 cups a day. Adjust taste and based on body response. Some people love to keep like a little notes and journal of how that plant made them feel. Say with passion flower, you may need the tea and a tincture to really get that deep relaxation that you're looking for. The tinctures bottles usually say how much you need. It's typically 1 to 2 milliliters, 20 to 40 drops, 1 to 3 times per day. With calming herbs taken 30 to 60 minutes before bed. So, as I close, I just ask us that before we gather, we ask. We're always living in relationship with the land, and we're waiting to receive those signals that, that permission to gather. We wait, and while we wait, we listen to land, to community, and to body. This ends urgency and extraction. The rest of the protocol then falls into place. I want to thank everyone here today. I appreciate your time and listening to me, and I'm just so grateful to be able to do this work. And with that, I'll close. I think that we're going to have some questions. I'm going to go back to the QR code too, just in case you guys want to. Oh, I think I messed something up. There we go. Just in case you guys want to save that. There we go. Do we have questions? Okay. I work in a clinic setting where providers do not have knowledge of plant medicine. Is there a source you recommend for contraindications and or medication interactions? You know, there are lots of great books. I don't know one offhand. If you connect with me, I'll come sit over here and I'll get your information and I'll send them to you. But there are more advanced herbal books even available on Amazon to get those contraindications because that's extremely important. Teas for children. Most herbs that you can buy at a health food store are going to be extremely safe for children. What I find is that the herbs that need the guidance of a midwife or a clinical herbalist, they're pretty hard to find, and that clinical herbalist is going to find them for you. The health food store worker usually has a pretty good idea. I can recommend the herbalist and Dr. Aviva Ram, R-O-M-M. She does child and pregnancy health specifically and women's health. So she's my go-to for many of her books. I have to reference that specific area. Again, it's Aviva, A-V-I-V-A, Ram, R-O-M-M. So I keep those around for them, for that type of question. This question could probably be a whole separate talk, but you could comment briefly on the methods used to dry and preserve the herbs. Is there a preferred traditional method? In the early days, I actually would just hang them in bundles, throughout the house. Whenever I started making my teas and packaging to sell them, I was really cautious of dust. And then also you have to do it in a thin bundle because the mold can collect. We'll see pictures of people doing thick bundles, and you want to be really cautious of mold. So a very thin sheet, even like creating a screen with a wood and laying them out that way. I use a dehydrator, and to be honest, a dehydrator, like just the least expensive, those round ones, if I find them at Goodwills, at thrift stores, I buy them and just keep them in the closet because, they may not last forever, but I've had an expensive one and then those, and they're efficient in drying. I think we're good. Thank you so much.